Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Fratello Talks. I'm your host Nacho, and today I'm joined by
RJ
and
Thomas.
We are going to be following up on a thought piece written by our colleague Lex about whether storytelling still sells watches in 2025. But of course, before we get into it, let's see what's on the wrist. RJ, what's on your wrist?
Today I'm wearing my Omega Constellation Globemaster in Setna Gold on a grey strap.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like it.
Gray alligator, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Never seen one in the wild.
Gray alligator.
Gray alligator.
That's what happens when they get really old. They go from green to gray. Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of them don't, though, because the strap makers catch them.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a bit of a dark note there.
Get some comments.
Moving swiftly on. Thomas, what is on your wrist today?
I'm not wearing the usual suspect. I'm instead wearing something very relevant to today's topic, because this is a Hercules.
Hercules.
And this specific one, not just this model, but this specific specimen, has been on the top of Mount Everest. So there's some storytelling for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I figured, suitable for today's topic.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. And I am wearing my Tudor Pelagos FXD back on the OEM strap. It's been a while since it's back on the OEM. I tend to just put it on NATO's
Prada stripe.
The Prada stripe, the Gucci people were saying, green and red.
A little bit Gucci, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
Matches your Fiat 500 Gucci edition.
Exactly, yeah, with the Dr. Dre beat speakers.
Yes.
Oh no, that's the Volkswagen Up. Sorry. Perfect. No, but that's what's on the wrist.
Yeah.
So how do we feel about storytelling in watches? Do we jump right into probably what is one of the best stories?
I feel good about it, man.
Okay. Tell us more.
No, I think...
Well, we can end the podcast.
Yeah.
No, I mean, people buy watches for different reasons. And I think one is people buy because of the brand. Because I cannot imagine that all the Rolex GMT Master owners out there bought it because of the Pan Am story, for example. Perhaps there are some, but I think so. People buy because of the brand. People buy because of the story, or the story about the brand, or the story about a specific watch. And what we see increasingly happening these days is that people buy a watch because of specifications.
Yeah,
about their performance, so to speak.
Specs and price, right?
Specs and price.
Yeah.
So, and perhaps that's then performance. So you have the specifications and a price that fits the specifications or not. If you have all three aligned, I think then you have a winning watch, right?
In theory. Yes.
So I think Submariner was once that, a Speedmaster Professional was once that, but in those cases, the price have been increasing rapidly over the past 5-6 years. But in the past, I think those kind of watches all the stars were aligned: the story, the specs, the price, and the brand name. Yeah. And I think that shifted, because brands, they increased prices, and not only that, but also because people got tired of those price increases, or they just can't afford it anymore. That's also a possibility. Or they don't find it worth it anymore. And you see that those people are looking more at brands that offer a lot of bang for the buck, basically. But yes, I do think that people still buy watches because of the story. I think the Moonswatch is a good story. The Moonwatch is a good story still, despite the price hikes. But yeah, because I think that people buy watches because of emotional reasons. Yeah. So then I think it's a fair reason. So none of these reasons are wrong to buy a watch for. Even if people just buy a watch because it says Rolex, it's fine. If that's your motivation, I don't mind.
Sure.
It's perfectly fine. What I do mind is if stories are made up. And of course, there are people that believe there was no such thing as a moon landing. But aside from those, you also have brands that come with a story and then build a brand around it, right? I think Bremont is an example where you can think, oh, really? Did someone really crash into a field in France from a farmer, which name was Bremont? I don't know. But it sounds nice. So I think there you need to be careful with storytelling. And I think you can be a little bit cautious about believing all these stories. But But yeah, if a story is really good, then why not? Because it's also perhaps a conversation maker. It ties into your personal feelings about a certain watch. A Daytona with all the racing, for example, or a Tag Heuer that was
the Carrera with the
Carrera, for example. Yep. But even there, if a watch is named after one of the drivers, it's fine. If you had these APs, the Barrichellos, the Barris. If you were really a fan of that person, you can afford it. Then why not? So, But today, 2025, yes, I still believe that people buy watches because of storytelling. But I also think that people are more critical towards those stories than 10, 15, 20 years ago. They don't believe everything that's being said by brands. And I think that's a very good starting point for today's consumers.
Yeah.
Question these things and make sure that it's true, or that you're comfortable with that story that they tell.
Yeah.
So there I feel that more and more people are looking at watches that either have all three elements that I discussed or are more spec-driven or performance-driven.
Right.
How about you guys?
Yeah. What's your take, Thomas?
Well, I agree on all the above, but I think there is a bit of a problem with modern marketing professionals in the sense that they have sort of been taught like storytelling is the holy grail of marketing and everything has to be a story. And I think at some point it can undermine the relevance of the product itself. If the story becomes so convoluted or so fabricated.
Yeah.
So Lex, for instance, has the example of the IWC Top Gun, was it? That was colored sort of grayish blue because that was the color of the undershirts of the pilots and what have you. That sort of stuff. I mean, we're often accused as watch writers of echoing these stories. But you have to believe us when we say, I think the primary job I have is to take press release materials, remove all the BS, and then tell the true story of the watch, because you won't believe how much of this we get fed every day.
And if then there are still BS in the article, then you can imagine how many BS there was in total.
No, I think that's a bit of a problem, and I think it signals a level of insecurity, because I think it's a much stronger story.
Insecurity by the brand.
Sorry?
By the brand.
Yeah. Because I think it's a much stronger story if a brand says, look, we have the greatest designers and they've poured over color use and we found that this is just the perfect color for this watch. End of story. I think that's a really strong story that makes for a confident watch that'll stand the test of time. Whereas if you go for this sort of this bite-sized little nugget of story that's very easy to capture in a single Instagram post, it becomes so fleeting and it becomes so shallow and it becomes fake. And I think that's a big problem with brands these days. And I think it requires some introspection from brands to say, do we really want that? Or should we maybe fire half our marketeers and keep it a bit simpler and just tell a genuine story?
There is a video on YouTube, and it is a conference talk from George Kern, now CEO of Breitling, but at the time he was CEO of IWC. And you can look it up. It's a if you search Zurich conference and then George Kern, I think you'll find it, but perhaps we can link to it. He talks about IWC, and he says, if this is the story or the price, then this is in marketing.
Right.
It's about storytelling. Sorry for the listeners. I'm using my hands here.
You said the majority of the value.
Yeah, the majority of the value is in the storytelling. And I think it was also that conference or somewhere else that he said, if you look at the IWC Portofino, for example, the story there is that they had great pictures, photographs of Portofino. And that was the starting point to build that Portofino collection. So the story is incredibly thin. If you use a picture of Portofino or people in Portofino in the 50s or I don't know when, as a starting point, I get it. It's an interesting thing because it oozes this 50s or 60s atmosphere, and it's nice. It's very nostalgic and so on. Who doesn't love those scenery pictures from those years? But to build an entire collection on that, man, that's proper storytelling, and it's very thin. But even with their pilot watches, I think there's a lot of storytelling, and it's also sometimes a bit of the wrong storytelling.
Yeah.
Because we all know that there were 5 brands delivering to Luftwaffe, and that they don't tell about. Of course, they don't speak about it. They are much more focusing on the watches they sent to RAF after World War II. And I get that, but it's so thin. It's tough. But and there I feel, man, the watch is just a pilot watch is a good watch, and that's it. It's an IWC, it's a good watch, it's a pilot watch, and there I feel I'd rather not tell the story, perhaps.
Yeah, you don't have to cake it in something that's not actually there, right? I mean, if the story is just something very, very small and very thin, like you say, it's there's no point in trying to blow it up to something that it isn't, because then that's where it can feel a little bit disingenuous. But at the same time, it's a little bit like. Leaning on that too hard, then you sort of go, well, in the end, it's a product. So there will always be people who are more drawn to the emotional side of the marketing, and there's people who will be far more drawn to the nitty gritty sort of specs side of the, like, is this a value proposition? Does this price make sense for the specs? And then ultimately, like, do I like the way that this product looks? Right? Exactly. I mean, that some people might look at that blue shade in the IWC and say, I don't care about the T-shirts or what the story is, but the color's nice. So exactly. I'm just gonna get it.
And it's very valid.
That's the thing. Yeah.
If just buy stuff that you like, that's very valid. And if the story is important or nice to you, that's a
But plus. I think we're seeing a sort of an acceleration of this storytelling where it becomes sort of a must-have. I feel if you look in the past of watches, the stories that have lasted, like the Moon story and the earliest dive watches and that sort of stuff, those take very little effort to sort of maintain because they're valid stories. But I feel now every single release must have a marketing blurb with some sort of story justifying the choices. And I think that makes it very shallow, and it also makes it kind of fickle. And I think this is a point that Lex made very well in his article, where if you look at Tag Heuer, for instance, one day they're marketing a watch that's a Super Mario story, and the next day they're marketing a watch that's a Formula One story. What is Tag Heuer then? Like,
is it Mario Kart or is it Formula One?
Yeah, well,
they're two very different things.
There you might have the linking element actually, but still, I mean,
it's all just racing.
It becomes so fickle, basically, and that's I think that's becoming a bit of a problem, and it's alienating a group of customers. I think.
I also feel that some of the stories are losing their relevance.
That's the thing as well, the knock-on effect.
Yeah, because now in 2025, you have customers that are born after 2000. I'm looking at you, Max, over on the other side of the camera.
The camera boy.
That perhaps their relationship to a story is non-existent. So when the moon landing was there in 1969, I was born in 1977, so it's also before my time. So I can also imagine that if you're born after 2000, it's very less relevant than it is to me already. Then storytelling becomes a bit
But what doesn't help is the fact of what Thomas says, that like everybody has a story these days. Everybody has a great story. How real it is or not, well, that can be debated. But at the same time, that takes away from the real stories, from the good stories that are actually real. How relevant they are could be argued. But at the same time, like when there's a good story, if you get to the point where you're so like tired of hearing, oh yeah, everybody's got like a great angle about why this is a cool watch, at some point you end up a little bit tired of it, right? And then you even see, not to single out Rolex, but you see that some stories are a little bit, if you look back, it can be a little bit problematic. Like when the famous Everest story, right? Like I would believe that this watch has been to the top of Everest just because there are images and these days scratches. With AI and there's scratches. These days with AI, it's you can make a lot of things happen, so things get even more sort of nebulous. But at the same time, the famous story of the Rolex at the top of Everest, and then people said, oh no, but it was a Smith's and it was this and it was that, and there's no concrete evidence. Rolex still definitely leans on the story to some degree. You still find it on the website and in some of the marketing, and you think, well, at some point it feels like that story, because of the brand as well, has transcended whether it's true or not, right? People can debate it, but at the same time, it's it kind of makes you question everything.
Exactly. So I also feel that a younger audience. So my conclusion personally is that a younger audience is less interested in those stories unless you have a very old soul like Max.
Yeah, exactly.
That you put value into these stories.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of younger people are not that interested in stories, but more about aesthetics, how it looks, what it is about, and about performance. So meaning price and specs.
Yeah, and a lot of people chase trends, right? So it's about trends. Like people's media consumption used to be reading and documentaries and longer form, and now it's another point that Lex makes in his story. People are sort of almost been trained to consume about 8 seconds per view of something on social media. And so then, of course, at that point you go, well, everything gets distilled down to this very fast moving, very fast paced media consumption. And then you can identify overall trends. And so brands try to follow them, I think, potentially now more than before.
So talking about trends, I don't know when this podcast is about to air, but currently I'm looking at some watch data from Chrono 24, for example. And we can see based on age groups that in the age group below 30 years old, there was a massive increase in interest in Cartier watches over the past few years.
Yeah.
And in dress watches in general. I wonder, the people below 30 in this case, so Gen Z, more or less, not more or less, I think that's Gen Z, buying Cartier watches, and then especially the Tank and the Santos come to mind. I'm not so convinced they bought these watches with stories in mind about Santos Dumont, about the design of the tank, about that the tank is then based on the Renault tank, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
It's much more on aesthetic, not even on performance. Perhaps performance, because you can buy a tank, what is it, a Must for, what is it, 1,500, 2,000 euros?
Yeah, meanwhile, a little bit more, actually. It's gone up a bit.
So I think you can buy for a relatively affordable amount, you can buy a Cartier watch. I think that comes into play, and the design comes into play.
Yeah,
but not the storytelling.
I think it's more style.
Yeah, exactly. It's
but I think there's a challenge here, because there's this misconception that any watch that is expensive is just hot air. There's tons of reasons why, and this is, I think, a bit of a problem with the very strong focus on value and specs. It's that what makes a watch potentially more costly isn't always reflected by the specs. It's now very easy to get great water resistance, accuracy, sapphire crystal, and micro adjust and quick release. You can tick all those boxes for 300 euros, basically, if you want. It's then very tempting to say, well, any watch more expensive than that, it's just hot air, it's just storytelling. Yeah. And I think brands are almost arming their own critics by approaching it that way, by just going for the stories rather than explaining properly why this is such a high-end watch, why it is that it's actually maybe 10,000 euros or 20,000 euros. You really feed this sort of conspiracy theory of it's all just hot air.
Yeah.
If you're going to say, this is basically a 300 euro watch with a very interesting backstory. No, there's a ton of work and research and development and refinement that goes into it that actually differentiates. I mean, there's exceptions, obviously. I'm not saying there's no overpriced watches, because there are. But I think you're feeding this sort of misconception. And I think it only widens the gap between people who are into storytelling and people who are into value and specs, because you're almost emphasizing each other's points, where where the truth really is in the middle somewhere.
You're making them pick and choose. It's almost like choose a side.
Yeah.
Do you love this? I don't know, this whatever watch it is because so-and-so big celebrity wore it on the red carpet, or because you saw it on your favorite influencer on Instagram, or because it's because of its history, because of its heritage, because of its craftsmanship that goes into it, right?
And we see how hard this is, because I see it as my task from the position that we have at Fratello to try and tell that story, if it's there and if it's true. So if we've been, for instance, to a factory and we've seen how the thing is made, and we feel like, okay, there's substance behind this.
Yeah.
I feel like it's our task to tell about that and to inform people about it. But we immediately get accused of, you're in their pockets and it's all just BS. And it's very interesting that sort of radicalization is taking place. And I think these brands are feeding it by accident or just by stupidity by focusing so much on the stories.
So which brands are doing it right, you would say?
I mean,
it's a tough one because it's so omnipresent, this whole focus on storytelling.
So what do you think about Chopard then, for example, Chopard LUC or Chopard Alpine Eagle?
That's probably a good example.
Because I think there's not that much storytelling going on there, to be honest. With the Alpine Eagle, the story is that they are rebuilding a watch, the Saint Moritz, that they did in the 80s, top of my head, that now the grandson or the son of Schäufele has been involved with. I think that's the story, which is a story, and that's fine. There's no real. It's not like a marketing story, marketing fluff.
No.
And I've been to the manufacture, both in Geneva or near Geneva, and in Fleurier. It's proper watchmaking. Yeah. It's really nicely done, and they do everything. They also do the cases, the bracelets. They produce it in house. They have their own gold. How do you say?
Forgery.
Foundry.
Foundry.
Yeah.
Forgery.
Something else. Sorry.
Perhaps they do that as well. No. But they have their own a gold foundry, so they do a lot of them sells in house, and the quality is very good. And the LUC watches, they are highly praised, and I feel they are so much focusing on the product itself and not so much on storytelling. And of course, these watches come at a price, and I think that's where you need to explain perhaps on what you do in-house and how much and so on. I think that's our role then as well. If we go there, we see it with our own eyes and then report about it. I think Rolex and Omega and Tudor, Breitling as well, perhaps there's a lot of storytelling with these brands. Yeah. And I think with the mentioned brands, the stories are quite valid.
Sure.
And they also... And you can debate about the pricing, of course, and about how they distribute their watches, yada, yada, yada. That's a different story. But they are also very much focused on delivering watches with high accuracy, being water resistant, being a watch for life, basically. Yep. And I feel that's not a bad thing either. They really focus on the product itself. And of course, there's some storytelling around it, but I also feel, especially for example with Rolex, it's in the right kind of frequency or amount of storytelling.
It never feels off, right? That's the thing. How do you feel about this new? We didn't really talk about it too much, but the Tudor documentary about the Navy divers that rescued because that's a little bit of I
think it's interesting.
It is an interesting story,
but it's not that interesting to go all raving about it. I mean, it was on Hodinkee. It was nicely written up by Jason Heaton, but the people who were divers that opened the hatch of the module that dropped in the sea, they were wearing Tudor watches. What brand of watches were the guys wearing that made sure that there was air in the tires of the vehicle that brought Saturn V rocket to the launch place?
That's the thing.
That's storytelling.
Daniel Wellington.
Daniel Wellington.
Yeah.
But it gets
I get it's a dive watch, but
think about how many people have used Formula One as well, right?
Yeah.
There were so many watch brands that have been associated with the Formula One brand for a long time. Obviously, Rolex was the timekeeper. Now it's Tag Heuer. But think about it. There was also
Longines
Oris,
in the past.
Longines. There's been many brands that are associated, maybe like not to the first degree or the second degree, but that's the thing. There's always this sort of involvement, but that's maybe a little bit more.
It depends a bit on the role of the watch brand. I think if it's timekeeping, like Omega and Olympic Games, it's Swiss Timing actually who does the timekeeping, and they batch it with Omega, which is fine. Seiko does the same with athletics. They do the whole timekeeping. They did Olympic Games in '64, I believe. the cool story there, by the way, is in the 64 they did the timekeeping and they made a printer that printed the results. And that's where Epson came from.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I really want an Epson
because
printer
Epson
now.
means electronic printer, son.
Right.
Yeah.
Son.
Yeah. Like Brandon's son.
No, but it's yeah.
I think it's depends on the amount.
But it's very tempting apparently because I think I wrote the release article on the Serica watch that was used by the EOD services, EOD divers.
Yeah.
And I actually wrote that I was a little bit disappointed that Serica would engage in this same practice because it immediately went from they always have these interesting designs with very interesting stories about the designs and like it felt much more coming out of themselves basically.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden they copy the trick that everybody does and they put a label on it like, oh, but these guys are using them and it's made for these guys. And it almost feels like, oh, you're apparently out of story to tell from yourself and now you need someone else's story. I don't know. It's so tempting when you get the chance as a brand.
I think that's the thing. I think the temptation is the thing is like, oh yeah, how can we market this watch if we don't have a story for it? Yeah. And maybe, I mean, I don't know what exactly the background is with that association. I've actually always, when you asked what are brands that are doing it right, I wanted to bring up Serica because they've always done these very nice ads that are sort of like taking inspiration from mid-century watch advertising and then applying it to their watches that are obviously also inspired by this sort of like that zeitgeist of watch design from that time. And I think in that sense, when you look at some of the movies that they've also produced for their YouTube channel and some of the people that they've associated with in the past, it's been good storytelling. It's been the kind of people that would buy one of their watches and sort of telling the story. I think in a way, though, the problem is, like you say, when we know as much as we do and we have all the connections that can be made, you sort of immediately look at something and go, yeah, that's the old what this brand also did back in the day or whatever, right? It feels like there's not a lot of fresh things to do, and that brings me to another point that I wanted to raise, and it's the fact that like there doesn't seem to be anything that, say something like the space race or whatever that brings people together in our current time in that same way. There's nothing that's like positively captivating the zeitgeist. I mean, you could say, yeah, okay, Formula One, there's its big audience. There's some brands that use football. There's a big audience there.
No, it's about achievements.
Yeah.
So are there currently like achievements that can bring the whole world together, like landing on the moon and so on?
Exactly.
And does the watch,
deep diving,
does the mechanical high-end watch actually play a role in it?
Yeah.
It's another.
That's the thing. That's the thing. Yeah, it's a tricky thing, and I think brands in a way have never had it harder to tell real stories, especially when it's not looking back. Because that's another thing that I would say with, for example, with the Speedmaster. The Speedmaster you buy today is still, it's different to the one that the astronauts wore, but you can still buy one just like from the same years of production, like the ones that the astronauts wore. But it is.
But the current one is very close. And
it's very close.
And
that's the thing. That's the thing. So then when Tudor tells a story about these divers and then the watch that they offered, like now maybe the closest thing is either the Black Bay or the Pelagos 39, you think, yeah, okay. So that considered, wouldn't you rather buy the period accurate watch, the watch that these people were actually wearing when they did this mission, right?
But I think a lot of people do because we see it in our email boxes and DMs when they slide in my DMs. I see people asking for vintage Speedmasters, of course, but also Rolex and Tudor that are correct to the timing.
That's maybe more insider baseball to some degree, though.
Yeah, exactly. But I think a lot of people are a bit wary about buying vintage, pre-owned, not per se, but vintage because it's can be a snake pit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then they want to buy something modern that at least comes close to what has been used back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I think it'll be something interesting to see how brands continue to try and tell stories and whether some will follow a completely different approach and maybe just focus on the product, do like a dead simple kind of thing. I mean, if you look at something like a brand like Formex, tends to really just be like, hey, well, here's the watch,
It's a
here's
good
the
watch,
specs,
yeah.
here's the price. There's not a lot of, somebody went skydiving with this or, whatever. Like, it's also when it's a new brand, and Thomas, you probably know this better than we do, where there isn't too much to lean on. You can't just kind of fabricate something, because especially these days, the audience, like you were saying earlier, is completely.
You can. Plenty of people do.
You can try, but it might not land very well.
Well, I think going back to Serica for a second, I think indeed they did really well in the sense that they told a story about a certain lifestyle and a certain style, and it wasn't specs focused, because I think if you're just going to reduce watches to specs and value, then it's a race to the bottom. You'll end up with something really impressive and really cheap, and that's the only watch you should buy, and end of hobby. Basically, what they did really well was sort of charge it with style and lifestyle and something you want to be part of, without resorting to fabricated stories or historical events or ambassadors or what have you. And I think there's an opportunity for new brands to position themselves as, first of all, a really good product, decent value, and to be something of your own. Be something, exude a certain image, exude a certain vibe, and then people who that resonates with will come. And I think that takes much more time, and it's much slower and more labor intensive in a way.
For sure.
But I think it's the only genuine way to do it as a new brand.
Do you think that there's like a temptation to cut to the finish line and just, the minute you get a new ambassador, hey, look who we have wearing our watch? Because I think what would feel a little bit more honest, and kind of also going back to Tudor, they had been providing watches, or so I was told by somebody from the brand that I spoke to, for the U.S. Navy divers for some time before they introduced this model, right? So there was already like a partnership going on there. They had collaborated with the French Navy with the initial FXD, and then very quickly they started collaborating with others. You see Omega creating watches for Navy divers as well, and those are not available for the general public. And perhaps someday a version of that might be available. Perhaps those will then sell on, and there you're really you have to plant the seeds for a good story. You can't just plant the seeds one day and the next day be able to pluck the fruit, right? That's I think the problem. And going back to the social media fast-paced consumption, that's where it becomes a problem, is that like you want that immediate payout, that immediate result, basically.
And the fact that it's fabricated, because if it's true, if that's actually happening, then by all means go and use it. It's a real story, and you'd be crazy not to use it. But the thing is that everybody wants stories like that, and they'll go to great lengths to fabricate them. That's, I think, the difference. If you're actually supplying something to some interesting people, then I mean, sure, go ahead, tell people about it.
But I also feel that, and see that it's difficult for new or relatively new brands to come up with that. Like you say, it's and like you said, Nacho, what kind of relevant things or events have been happening. If you have a brand like Narcane, I think they have a lot of stuff aligned, right? They have like proper movements. They have a unique design. You can see it's an Narcane, so kind of a unique design and color codes and so on. But the story is that they have some ambassadors, right? There's no other real story to that watch other than it's for adventurous people. You can use it while biking, hiking, mountain climbing, playing tennis. They have Matt Abden, I believe.
I believe so, but unofficially.
Unofficially. Yeah, they unofficially have.
But
Matt
they had another tennis player. I don't remember who, but they did have a tennis player. Yeah.
So therefore, those are the things you can do as a new brand, and I think that's. But and in the end, to be very honest, if I would be new to watches and I just see on Instagram or TikTok or on Fratello, I see a nice picture or I see a picture of a nice watch and I like how it looks, then by all means, then start to dig, what's the brand about? What is the watch about? What are the specifications? I think that's also how I fell in love with certain watches, even from big brands, that you see the watch first, then you think, oh man, that's a really nice looking watch. And then you start to dig in. And then if there's a story to it, nice, but it's an additional thing. And for me, there was actually also a little bit with the, believe it or not, with the Speedmaster Professional. It was designed first, because when I was younger, when I was in the 90s, when it was in the 90s, I didn't have that much connection with the whole Moonwatch story, of course, with the moon landing and so on. It happened before my time, so it was actually between an IWC pilot chronograph and a Speedmaster, but I like the Speedmaster better.
Fratello would have looked totally different.
And then for me, the story is additionally super nice. I mean, it's a true story, and they went through great lengths of having the watch tested and qualified by NASA. But at that time, I didn't know about that.
Yeah. That just adds something on top. It should always be. It should always add something on top. It should never be. It could be what gets you interested. It could be like the stepping stone into a brand or into a specific watch. But at the same time, that's the issue. Like you said, it's you're never going to grab everybody's attention in the same way. No. And I think that's that's why we're not in marketing, right?
Exactly. Just, and then of course there's personal stories that make you want to buy a watch.
Of course.
If your father or grandfather had this specific type of watch or watch brand, then it can be very likely that you also want to have that watch. Sure. And then that's also storytelling, but it's like a personal story or personal attachment to a brand or a watch, which is incredibly valid as well, of course.
For sure. Cool. Well, I think we can maybe wrap it up there.
The comments.
I'll get to the comment of the week, which refers to our previous episode, which was 2 episodes ago, about watch modding. You guys were there, remember? Yep. And it's from Robert Fassberg, who says, I would consider getting a clear case back added to a watch to see the movement. Would you consider that a mod? And would you consider that mod?
They often do it on old Grand Seikos, right? 60s
King Seikos, Grand Seikos. Yeah,
it makes sense there. It was the first mod I did back in 99.
Really?
I bought a additional case back for my Speedmaster 145012 caliber 321 because the movement is so nice. My watchmaker said, "Hey, if I order a spare case back, I'll drill a hole in it, put a glass in it."
Oh,
boom!
Wow.
Really?
Yeah. And now they sell those. They sell those aftermarket.
Yeah,
but he did it the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. So it was the original case back then used, because I think a lot of aftermarket stuff is also an aftermarket case back used.
Yeah.
Do I consider it modding? Yeah, perhaps it's a little.
It's not original. It's not original. Yeah, I think so. I think it's a good mod if you go for that kind of case back. Always make sure it's like a higher quality one, because you don't want to mess up the threads on your case back. It's a fairly reversible mod. It's a fairly easy thing to do, either yourself if you're brave enough or foolish enough, or for a watchmaker, and that's a good one. It's a good one. Nice. Yeah. Perfect. All right. Well, thanks guys for the discussion, and thank you for tuning in. As always, leave your thoughts on the topic of does storytelling still sell watches today in the comments below. We know you have a lot of opinions because we saw them below Lex's article, so share them here as well. And as always, tune in next week for another episode of Fratello Talks. See you then.